let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. Mr. Brennan?
Present.
Mr. Rickerman?
Here.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Present.
Mr. Vine?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mayor Benjamin?
Here.
Yeah.
All right, Reverend McDowell, would you please give us a word?
Yes. Let us pray. Oh Lord, in the midst of this hot and humid day, we give you thanks for life and a reasonable amount of health. This pandemic has wreaked havoc in our city and in our community. We pray for relief. We pray for your sensitive touch to touch us in such a way that we feel your power. To all of those who are afflicted with this virus, we pray for their continued health, that they may be strengthened by peace, love, and of course, the tender finger of healing. Be with us as a council as we dive deep into the issues of our city. Allow us to sense and to feel your presence in decision making. Lord, we ask it and claim it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend McDowell.
Yes, sir.
All right. The adoption of the agenda, I think we have at least one amendment to the agenda. Mr. Duval, will you make that motion?
I move we adopt the agenda presented with the addition, and I didn't catch the name of the thing you had.
Yes.
What,
It's adding the Commission on the Future of Columbia to item 31 in executive session, Mr. Duval.
Okay.
second, any discussion? Seeing none, with the previous question, clerk call the roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickerman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. Thank you, ma'am.
City Council discussion action, Mr. Mayor? Ready?
No, we got to approve the minutes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, the approval of the minutes first. Yes, sir. Council is asked to approve the May 19th, 2020 and May 31st, 2020 City Council meeting minutes.
There a
So
motion?
moved.
There a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move.
Mr. Brennan?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye.
Thank you.
Briefly, I'll just make some comments around COVID-19 update. Obviously, and then we'll have a sit rep from Director Tinsley. You know, we're still in some challenging times. Obviously, we all expected, just as you've seen all across the country, with the return of college students. We expected that while we were enjoying the downward pressure of some of our collective actions around social distancing and masking, the upward pressure of having the young people come back from literally scores of communities all across the country, some around the world, that would have disparate impact on our numbers. Richland County is feeling numbers and upward pressure significantly right now. We are seeing some great compliance by a significant number of students, but also a significant number who've exhibited not much regard for the responsibility that we have as we approach the pandemic and pushing for deceleration in the number of cases. Many of you saw on full display the actions that the that Chief Jenkins supported all of our resources at the city. Had to respond to the particular incident at Pamela Compress. And I expect that as a result of that direct action, which, as we all know, was precipitated by a letter that we requested as a city council, the city manager send to a number of these student housing complexes in particular, asking that they seriously consider shuttering them to try and ward off this type of an event. We expect that that continued strict enforcement of the governor's executive order and the masking ordinance will hopefully begin to see some downward pressures. I've been in communication with the university, as I know many of you have. Expect to have a full report from them as to the work. I think I shared with Teresa, if we haven't pushed it out to council, if everyone hadn't seen President Kasler's most recent email about the efforts that they're initiating on campus right now. We need to see that and then so much more. It's always going to come down to mutual responsibility and collective responsibility to try and tackle this thing. And when you hear, as we've all heard, but when you hear the response of one of the young men to Chief Jenkins the other day that he was immune, and you realize that it helps you realize that we still got a long way to go. We got a long way to go. So we're going to keep pushing, keep doing our work. We are well into the semester now, so the opportunities for everyone to be fully aware of what their responsibilities are, what the laws, the ordinances, and executive orders are. Everyone's aware. So we're going to have to be that much tougher as we seek to enforce a deceleration in the number of COVID cases. We're going to do that. Chief, can you give us a sit rep?
Gary, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can. Yeah.
All right, I was talking away on mute. Thank y'all. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam City Manager. Again, thank you for your time, and just a quick update on testing and testing data. There'll be some additional information in your inbox this afternoon. As of yesterday, the numbers are total tests, or actually as of Sunday, our state passed a milestone of over 1 million testing done, completed thus far. The state average is positive test rate is about 15% of those. 1 million over 855,000 were negative. 158, just north of 158,000 were positive. So as of reporting out of yesterday, we were at, our state had 117,333 confirmed positive cases. And unfortunately, our deaths due to COVID-19 were posted at 2,588. Here in Richland County, we are north of 10,869 confirmed total cases, with unfortunately 188 confirmed deaths due to COVID. As far as testing in the city, staff continues to increase testing sites here as we continue to partner with DHEC, Prisma Health, CVS Health, Benedict College. The static testing, drive-through testing site at the old Pardon and Parole building, we're listing at address 2204 Lee Street, just to help with GPS routing for anyone seeking testing there, has been extended. It will run through Thursday, September 29th. We're hoping we will continue that as a static site, but we're doing it month to month. And Kay has been working very diligently and working with area partners to get those scheduled. And again, the location for that is the hours of operation are every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. There's no appointment nor referral needed. Also, we're partnering with CVS Health and Benedict College. As of yesterday, testing started at the Benedict College location at 1903 Two Notch Road, and that will run through September 30th. And the hours of operation for that location will be Monday through Saturday 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. An appointment is needed, so individuals can pre-register just to make sure we have the capacity there. And because it is a rapid test site, they can pre-register by calling 803-705-4351, and no referral is needed at that as well. And also, we are pushing all of this out through our PR department, and staff are pushing that through all our social media platforms. You can also visit our website to include our microsite at resilient.columbiasc.gov for all the test sites. Also at DHEC, their website, all that information is pushed out. So there's been a lot of action working in back to get that taken care of. And lastly, a point worth noting, I know that Mayor, you alluded to it last discussion. Those jurisdictions in our state that have mask requirements, or mask ordinances, if you will, are seeing a 44.2% decrease in total cases. So we are still seeking to mitigate, although, as you alluded, some of the colleges coming back, we expect to see some spikes there, and we're trying to mitigate that spread as well as we partner with those folks. So thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Director Tinsley? Teresa, we may have mentioned it in the previous meeting, but if we haven't, our plans for flu shots, as we obviously understand the mitigation measures that are being put in place everywhere may also help with the flu as well, increase mask wearing and everything. Just trying to make sure we don't get hit with a double whammy of COVID and the flu. I know you guys been working with Dr. Frankie now to get us ready for that.
We're teed up to do that. I know the window that's ideal for everybody, not just city employees. Obviously, we're prepared with flu shots, but for the public at large is in September, and I think the rule of thumb is by Halloween you should have your flu shots. So that's right here upon us. We need to start encouraging that as well. And I think Pam has also been talking with a private partner who reached out to us, one of the big boxes their pharmacy is interested in helping facilitate that.
Just whatever we can do to both obviously feel good about where we are with our employees. Let's make sure we cover the landscape there, and then whatever additional role we can play, make sure that the overall community has access to testing. Let's get thoughtful and strategic there too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you, Director Tinsley. No questions.
Yeah.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Aaron. All right.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, please. I'm sorry, Dan. Can't see that.
Director Tinsley, can you work with DHEC to confirm the testing numbers? WYFF has reported the same things that the doctors here reported to me, that negative testing numbers are not being calculated. There are thousands of tests up in the upstate at hospitals, doctor's office, the same thing that the medical community here has been talking about, because that really affects our decision making, because that changes, it doesn't change the positive numbers that are coming up, it changes the amount of percentages, and we are trying to lower that percentage, and if we're not calculating all, making decisions that aren't 100% on those numbers. So if you could find out what they're doing about that, I'll be glad to send a link to everybody from the story from the MDC in the upstate. But I think it's very important that we're tracking this, because we're making decisions based on caseloads, and if we're not getting the right numbers, we're not going to be able to make the right decisions.
Yes, sir. We'll reach out today and seek that information and respond back to council.
Thank you.
All right. Keep it moving, Ms. Wilson.
Yes, sir. Our next discussion and action item is the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Ms. Melissa Kaufman, Missy, our budget and program management director, will take us through a couple of items. The the main items, of course, for council would be the allocations for hospitality tax and accommodations tax funding. But if we could, Mayor, we'd like to start with just a brief financial update. As you know, I have maintained a position of monitoring a budget that we prepared without certain revenue projections that we normally have, trying to hold steady. I can't say enough about our staff, frontline and otherwise, who have continued to work through this pandemic, really never stopping. I've always said we may be doing things differently, and I'm actually quite pleased and will eventually share with you some of the very creative and novel ways that our staff have learned to still provide service delivery very seamlessly, but in new and different ways that, quite frankly, some of those ways I think may stay with us for the long term. So with that said, we're not at a point to propose any type of amendments. We are running some scenarios for you for if and when that becomes necessary, but did want to talk you through when the revenue projections may be more realistic, because they just still are not yet there. As well as remind you of a few external contracts and special projects that you typically allocate funding towards, to see if that's still your intent at this point.
Okay. Super. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Thanks.
So as Ms. Wilson's mentioned, we want to cover a few topics today with City Council, mostly with regards to financial update, providing you sort of a look at our path forward a little bit with regards to our revenue collections and where we stand with regards to just timelines, not necessarily talk about numbers or projections at this point. It is just September 1st. We're technically only 1 month into the fiscal year as it comes to financial reporting, given that August ended yesterday. We also want to talk a little bit about what we have spent so far with regards to our COVID-19 response, and an update on various COVID-19 response resources that we are tapping into. A few items left over from our budget process will be the FY current fiscal year 2021, some of our external contracts and special project contracts that we have in place, along with just updating with regard to our hospitality tax funding and accommodations tax funding. No allocations have been made at this point for this fiscal year, so just bringing these items back for City Council consideration. So one of the things we wanted to share with folks, again, just in terms of a reminder, in terms of as we're looking at the big picture of where we are in terms of our revenue collections, not necessarily numbers again, but just sort of our timeline of how and when we collect revenues, and sort of overlay that with also the additional impacts of COVID-19 and what that does to our projection schedules and timelines. As we pointed out during the budget process, we have identified a certain number of specific revenue streams that we think are going to have the most impact from COVID-19. Not to say that this is an exclusive or exhaustive list, but certainly those things that we think are the most likely candidates for impacts of COVID-19. We'll discuss each of these by fund. So starting first with our general fund, property taxes, we're not 100% certain, what really the impacts would be on property tax. Certainly I think we've all seen various, activities as it relates to real estate market, whether the sales of those real estate transactions are what they would have been without COVID-19. We're still looking into that. We don't really have that information to discuss at this point. So, but as far as the different categories of property tax, we certainly expect loss, which is local option sales tax, to be impacted. Of course, as the sales tax generations are reduced, so goes the revenues generated by local option sales tax. Unfortunately, the way that impacts our budget so much is that means that the revenues that we collect there will be less, which means that we will have less credit to give back to our property taxpayers. So while there may not be a tax increase, there may be a reduced amount of the credit, which will translate or look like a property tax increase on their property tax bill that they receive later in this year. So we do anticipate there to be some impacts there, but again, are still monitoring those collections. Those revenues come in monthly, and they are allocated to us by the state through Richland County. I indicated on here collection periods fourth quarter because we receive those annually. And then we're looking at those fiscal impacts being the current fiscal year and on to next fiscal year potentially. Real property, of course, as I was just mentioning, we still aren't really certain what kind of impact we expect on those as we talk with our colleagues around the state. And that may differ geographically. Some areas may have more of an impact than others, so we're just kind of gauging where we are in the Midlands area. We receive those revenues primarily in December. Certainly there's some transactions that trickle out throughout the year, but primarily those funds come in December. And I want to overlay this conversation in terms of what our normal schedule would be with regards to revenue forecasting and how we would be preparing for next year's budget. And of course, revenue forecasting and revenue projections to be able to build a budget with depends on data. The later this data is, or the more influences that we can anticipate on this data, further impact our ability to be able to do forecasting and projections. And property taxes coming in December is certainly one of those categories. Again, we're thinking that the impact here would be our current fiscal year collections as well as next year's fiscal year collections. Personal property, I put vehicles, but of course, that's anything personal property related. So, and those come in while they come in monthly. As those sales also are, impacted by consumer activities. We do anticipate there to be some revenue impacts here. Business license is certainly an area that we do anticipate some impacts from COVID-19. Business licenses are collected annually. They are now collected they are due in May. So in May of 2021, when business licenses are due, they will be on the business transaction period of 2020 for that business. So of course, as businesses are impacted this year, we anticipate those collections in May to be impacted. And of course, everything that we're talking about here, we made these adjustments as we adopted the budget for this year. But again, no one has a crystal ball to sort of know what the full impacts will be on these revenue streams beyond what we've already forecasted in our budget. We will certainly hope that businesses, there certainly have been some winners and some losers here in this environment, but how they impact overall is still unknown. Building permits, certainly there's some activity in the building industry. Commercial versus residential, so we don't really have complete impacts of what we will see with building permits. Overall, building permit revenue is not significant in the general fund, but with where we are now, any impact, $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, can be pretty significant on a budget that's already reduced by more than $14 million from our normal operations. So we don't take any of our revenue reductions lightly. Moving on to special revenue, I don't think it's anyone's surprise that hospitality tax, accommodations tax, and tourism development fee will very much be impacted by COVID-19. And most likely accommodations tax and tourism development fee would be the most significant of those impacted based on the hotel occupancy rates, not just the occupancy rates, but also the rates in which the hotels are able to charge for rooms. So we do expect those to be impacted. For hospitality tax, we are seeing revenue collections come in. Those come in monthly. With the delay, we extended the deadline for collections whenever we were first impacted by COVID, and then now we're caught up, so we're back to collecting revenues. Of course, we only have 1 month of revenues for this fiscal year to look at, so it's hard to sort of make a gauge or estimate on where we think things are headed. With regards to how we ended in 1920, we were a little off of the revenues that we forecasted for hospitality tax revenues, but we did have some savings in the overall expense side, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We are still hopeful, of course, that restaurants are able to pick up, continue collection, continue activity, and we'll continue to monitor those as we go throughout the year. Accommodations tax, those revenues are collected by the state and remitted to us quarterly. We don't receive those until usually about 2 months after the end of the quarter, so that puts us really delayed in terms of knowing how we are doing in collections. We did receive the fourth quarter collections for 1920 here just a couple weeks ago in August. And of course, they were, as expected, they were short from prior years. And so we're still continuing to monitor those. We will not have the first quarter of this fiscal year 2021's collections until somewhere about October timeframe. Tourism development fee, that's also collected on hotel occupancy. That's collected by the city monthly, so we're continuing to monitor those as well. And next, we have parking fund. Our garages, of course, we expect to have impacts on our monthly garages, maybe improving some as we go throughout the year, but still trying to collect on where we are today. On-street parking, as businesses are closed, there's no need for on-street parking, so of course we expect those to also be impacted. Fines are also, as on-street parking is reduced, therefore fines are also reduced, or collections for those fines. And special events, I've put moderate, but really that's both, any of these parking categories really should be designated as high or critical, especially with regards to special events, as there are not very many, if any, special events in which there would be parking revenues for. Just kind of showing again our schedule in terms of how we collect our time frames. You know, we just started the fiscal year in July and August. The only thing we've collected so far is our fourth quarter, and then our accommodations tax. We're here at September 1st, so we're still at the very beginning. October is when we normally would be collecting our revenues, or starting our revenue forecasting for the next fiscal year. Again, forecasting really is dependent upon the revenue and data, the information that we have available to us, which is if it's not minimal, it's certainly not typical. So we are trying to utilize other ways of evaluating what we might look at, whether it's looking at our surrounding communities and collaborating with our peers, or watching state revenues for sales tax and just activity in general from our own collections. Looking forward, then the next area where we would have is December. We start seeing property taxes come in, and then hopefully by then we would have the first quarter A-tax collections. Moving on, then the next big area of revenue collections would be May. By May, we are then deep into the budget process. Generally in May, we are advertising the budget, and in June, we are passing the budget. So again, we will be in a very crammed period trying to do our projections amidst, certainly some uncertainty. At the bottom, just showing the different monthly collections that we do get, which would be our personal property taxes, local option sales tax, building permits, hospitality, tourism fees, parking garages, and all of our parking revenues. Again, so we just wanted to discuss a little bit. I know folks are anxious to sort of know how we are doing with regards to our revenue collections, what we're seeing. And I think the takeaway from this point is that it's really very early to make any kind of projections or impacts of what we're doing. It is just September 1st, so we are continuing to monitor. But part of our purpose too is just to sort of lay out for you all in terms of where we're going and what we may bring to you in the coming months as we start to look at both the current fiscal year as we adopted the budget for 2021. We've indicated that we would come back later in the calendar year to consider whether or not we needed to make any other amendments. That may be in the November, December timeframe. By then, we'll have some experience with revenues, also some experience with our expenditure activity, and we'll discuss a little bit more about what we may need to do to either balance budgets or forecast any additional savings as we look forward to the next fiscal year. And then, of course, by January, we're certainly starting the process all over. A lot of this will take take into consideration, you know, as we say every year, the city's not without revenues. We may have reduced revenues, so it's just that we have, of course, less revenues than we do expenditures, or less, I should say, less revenues than activities and things we want to spend on. So it'll be a matter of prioritizing those things. And as we come forward to you, the city manager, I'm certain will be working with you on helping to gather input on where priorities would be applied. So that's sort of where we are with regards to our revenue collection. So I'm just going to move on next to the COVID-19. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions or discussions we want to have at this point, Ms. Wilson, before we move on to the next section, or if you just want me to keep going.
No, Missy, unless you want to get a little direction from council on business license, the model ordinance, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Okay.
As Ms. Wilson mentioned, we did want to remind council that prior to where we were with some of our overall revenue discussions that we've been having with City Council over the past 18 months, one of those areas was discussion about adoption of the business license model ordinance. I don't know if Jeff is on the line, if he wants to make any other comments, but at this point, the plan is to come back with you in October to talk about that path forward, what that looks like, and then certainly the activities that would be around adoption of a model business license ordinance.
I think there's some, if Jeff's on, he may want to discuss maybe some thoughts around that from the Municipal Association, the timing of doing it now. I guess you could look at it one of two ways. That is it more burdensome to introduce it now, just because it would be, you know, whenever you do it, there'll be some winners and losers. The losers may not lose as much if you do it now. And so that was kind of our thought, not that we're, you know, suggesting either way, but we had always planned to move forward. And so it's in October, probably want to talk to y'all about that. We're trying to, as best we can, knowing we need to move forward, just make sure that folks that will be impacted will not be impacted maybe quite as much.
I think this would be the easiest time to adopt a change. As the city manager said, those that are going to get an increase from this change will not have a big increase. And those that are going to get a windfall, not a windfall, but a lesser amount will appreciate that. So this would be a great time to ease into a model ordinance that the state legislature is poised to mandate for us anyhow. And I would support moving forward in October.
What y'all are talking about this October?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I you know, just spending the last few days with different business folks, I think it would be ill-advised to make a change right now. I think we need to get through COVID. I think we need to let businesses get back up on their feet and stabilize before we start changing the model. I think we're a year out from it, to be honest.
We're not changing the model. We are adopting the model. Our ordinance is way out of date.
Right.
It needs to be changed
for us. And I just think with all that's going on in the business community, I mean, people are fighting for customers, fighting to pay their bills, they're fighting to stay alive. So, I mean, anything right now, and the problem is that you made the point earlier, there's going to be winners and losers. I just think we need to be careful, and it would be a good idea for us to maybe get some input from the people who are directly affected by it. You know, going towards this makes a lot of sense. I just think the timing is not right.
Doesn't the model ordinance give so many of these different organizations some relief? I mean, is it? So we're actually talking about providing relief to a number of businesses, not an additional burden. Maybe obviously different systems, but.
And we can, Mayor, talk, you know, in executive session as well about a couple of items, and maybe The idea was to introduce it in a way that, yes, there would be relief provided. If there are any businesses where it appears the relief would not be impactful to them and the timing, as Mr. Rickman is saying, would be harder on them, we can talk about that too. All in all, I think we just want some direction on if you want to move forward. So,
I hear Daniel's concerns, and I want to hear more about them. Obviously, let's only talk in executive session about things that we need to. But this is long overdue. So if we're finally in a position, a point where we can provide businesses the relief they need when they need it most, and get in line with other cities in the state, and in line with legislative, when we agree with them, then I think there's an opportunity here. So I'll put that on the table. Daniel?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we just need to make sure that that we're engaged with the business community and see how it's going. I just think there's a lot of things people are going through right now. And, if we're looking to make this starting April 1, that may be a different ballpark. When the license changes over, I would just ask us to tread lightly and carefully. Not that I think that the model business ordinance doesn't get us in line. It's just change in a time when people are juggling a lot of things creates more time. So I just ask us to tread lightly.
yes.
If I could add to that, so Councilman Rickman made a good point. So we would be talking about this and passing the ordinance in October. It would not take effect, though, until the new calendar year. So it really would not affect the renewals until the new renewal dates would occur next May. So starting this early will give staff the opportunity to reach out and talk with the various businesses on how this is going to affect them. So when we say October, that doesn't mean we're not expecting any new pricing changes or anything to take place on that day.
Yeah, I would just add, just important, because people are still trying to pick up, that we try to engage with them.
Yes, sir. And that's a very good point. That was part of the reason we wanted to begin as soon as possible to begin the engagement. Because the model ordinance will actually push the renewal into May. So the way they're valued through NAICS codes, the changes that we'll have, that gives us, working with the various businesses, that gives them up till May for those changes to take effect. It would affect a new business that comes in at that moment, but for all the renewals, which would be roughly our 10,000 businesses out there, this gives us about 4, 5, 6 months to be working with them as we go and reach the renewal period.
So were you all, Jeff, anticipating a presentation in October just to refresh council on the whole model ordinance, and then allow them at that point to further discuss the path forward? Okay.
I think that'd be helpful, Teresa, in addition to what the overall business engagement public education plan might look like to address those other concerns. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir, Mr. McDowell.
Yes. I hear what Daniel is saying, and I agree with some of that. It would certainly be good if the model could certainly be talked through, and then we follow. Remember, and I think Daniel said something to this effect, that we're still in that COVID-19 season. And I think we need to tread very cautiously with how we do this and when we do this.
Thank you, Rob. All right.
We will bring that information back to you all as requested.
Well, that's certainly the model that I would certainly help me a lot in understanding why we don't want to jump the gun too quick.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item we wanted to talk about was the activity we have undertaken so far with regards to COVID-19 in regards to our response to our costs through June 30th. And the June 30th date is significant because the CARES Act, the coronavirus relief funds administered through the state of South Carolina phased out their application process, if you will, into two phases. The first phase being those direct expenses or costs incurred through June 30th of this year, of course. So the costs that we have incurred to date, we're totaling at about $1.1 million of costs that we think that we have submitted so far for potential reimbursement through the CARES Act. We've also submitted an application for FEMA public assistance, which is what most of us remember or think of with regards to the normal emergency response that FEMA provides to public entities in the midst of or post-disaster. For the FEMA portion, we're still in the state of emergency, so therefore the emergency period has not closed. So there's not a June 30 sort of deadline the way that there was for CARES. But the way that the grant is being administered here was that the FEMA costs were to be submitted as well, in addition to CARES. And in part, that's, I believe, just so that there could be coordination of duplication of benefits. Of course, you can only submit or be reimbursed from one of the programs. You can't be reimbursed for the same cost from both programs. So those items that there are several of the activities or the costs that sort of straddle into both areas. We did not have clarity on. We submitted for both, and then there are certainly some items that qualify for CARES funding that did not qualify for FEMA, and vice versa. They were very clear about not allowing costs to be submitted under both categories. But there is some gray area that we found as we were preparing our applications. So I would ask that you, as you look at this chart that we've provided, the $1.1 million from the CARES and then $877,000 from FEMA, those are not to be totaled costs, but the 1.1 would certainly be inclusive of some of the 877,000, but not all of it. In terms of looking forward into phase two, we are hopeful that the $1.5 million that City Council allocated for small business support will also be able to be submitted for reimbursement, as well as allocation for senior resources for meals for seniors. There are certain nuances to both of these allocations and certain nuances of the grant that may make some of this funding not eligible, but we're working through what that might be as we look forward with the CARES Act team. I'm hopeful that we'll have some information here in the next week or two as to how much of what we have submitted will be has been deemed eligible for reimbursement. Any questions about this list before I move on?
Thank you.
Yep. The grant that we have received with regards to COVID-19 assistance is a $2.9 million grant for EDA, which is Small Business Support Loans, again, revolving loan fund. Of course, there's still action plans that are associated with these grants, and the grants are not yet eligible for allocation, but the staff is working through the activities that need to occur in order to make these funds available. We also have a HUD CDBG coronavirus allocation of $611,000, and then HUD HOPWA, which is Housing of Persons with AIDS, and coronavirus of $220,000. Of course, all three of these allocations have very specific purposes and uses, most of which are spelled out and will be spelled out in action plans, some of which have been brought to you, some of which is still in process. And then the final one is from the Office of Justice, which is assistance specifically the police department has received with regards to the additional supplemental funding, primarily around the use of police overtime in response to COVID-19. They have an award of up to $255,000. They've not drawn those funds to my knowledge yet, and some of those are still subject to, of course, requirements that they will have to meet in order to make those funds to be eligible. Any questions or comments about COVID before we move into the next area? Okay. So one of the first items we wanted to discuss with you all today are the external services contracts. These are contracts that we have with some external organizations that the city has supported for specific purposes or uses over the past couple of years. In prior years, we would typically allocate what had been appropriated in the prior years and just continue forward, possibly with some adjustments. Of course, with the budgets being the way that they are, and in order to make some budget balances, and in addition, the fact that so many of our other allocations have been reduced, we did not want to make into an assumption what funding would be available for these contracts going forward. In addition, the funding sources for some of these contracts that are split between general fund and some of our other special revenue streams. Of course, these budgets are significantly impacted, so we need to be able to know what council's direction is and how we move forward with their allocations. The first one being our contract with One Columbia. We have funded One Columbia partially with Accommodations Tax of 5% general purpose allocation, which is basically treated like general fund activities. And then the other half of One Columbia's contract is funded from H-Tax for a total contract of $167,000. If the accommodations tax funding of $83,800, that exceeds the amount available of the total 5% funds. So that $83,000 would more than eat up the entire allocation for the 5%, which you'll see in a future slide is $72,000 available to fund. And as you can see, this fund here is $82,000. So we need to know whether or not to move forward with the full funding of their contract as requested, or as prior year, or if we need to make adjustments. If it is, of course, going to be funded at the full amount, we need to discuss where the a supplemental amount will come from. Next, we have the Fast Forward contract. We have funded them in part. They are currently in the general fund in the Community Development Department's budget. And then we've also funded them in years past. They've been split between general fund and water and sewer, 50-50 for a total contract of $100,000. This does not take into account funding that they have from our CDBG funds that they submit grants for, but I do understand that they have some funding from CDBG dollars as well.
It's in addition to the typical 50,000, or is that the same 50,000?
For Fast Forward?
Yes.
I believe this is in addition to these two fundings, but no, I don't think it's in addition to what they get on top of what they've received in the past. I think it's an application they submit going forward. But their community promotions funding is $50,000. I think CDBG is in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $30,000.
Okay.
Next, we have our River Alliance contract that we have supported for several years. That contract has been $55,000. The general fund portion was up just a little bit a couple of years ago, and that amount is $29,000. And then the hospitality tax portion of that contract is $26,000. And then finally, the Together We Can Read, again, is funded from our A-Tax 5% general purpose. We've typically allocated $25,000 for that program out of, the general purpose portion of A-Tax, which is, as indicated, is short if we were to fund the full amounts.
Total amount, A-Tax, you said 72, what was it?
72.
Tamika, we're going to do Together We Can Read this year, or what's the plans?
So yes, sir, I've had some preliminary conversations already with Tracy Young Cooper. This year, as you know, we weren't able to do it, but we were able to get the books in the hands of the students. So we still did that. And our goal was to do a virtual read. That didn't quite work out from our standpoint, but we've been talking about doing it that way next year. We know it's going to have to change. So it just depends on what the book is. We always come in under budget. And we wouldn't order quite as many books because we wouldn't have the volunteers going into the school. But yes, I think this year is critical that we continue this partnership and keep our children reading and enjoying a love of reading for about their city.
All right.
If we fund together, we read, we will not have the funds to keep one Columbia whole.
Oh, yeah, we well, I just think
Say
it's
that
I think we
important.
could. I think we could reduce together. We could read to 20, but I wouldn't want to reduce it much past that. Like I said, I think we're going to have less books, so I think we could do 20. But that's still, of course, one Columbia's portion is even more than what the 5% is. So we would still need to find another source.
Well, it'll be 20. That'll be 20. If 72 is available, we did 20. The two things funding from some clear, Missy. Fast forward in River Alliance, their sources are water and sewer and H-tax, not A-tax, right? Is that correct? Am I
Correct. They are not funded out of A-tax. General fund and H-tax.
So we could easily do 20 for together. We can read and the 52 or so towards One Columbia. That's complemented by the H-tax funding that's on the currently in the budget, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just think all four of these are incredibly important for different reasons at this time. I think it's important not to abandon the arts as we work through this, also through this. The work that Dee Albrecht and her team does at Fast Forward for folks who have incredible value, incredible records of service, who in the toughest times in their lives, and she and her crew helps them get back on track. I just think the world of her and the research they provide that I rely on heavily. And obviously the awesome things that are happening, both public-private partnerships, intergovernmental with Richland County and other, just seeing some of the visions that many of you have worked on for years as we build out the Riverwalk. It's again not time to take our foot off the gas there, and you know our babies, and the importance of literacy as they all struggle through these challenging times. We just got to figure out a way to make it work. It's just important. Mr. Rickenman?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe we ought to try to take a look at all the different groups that we have, since this is a blend of multiple accounts, and I think some of the other groups can kind of go look at it in a holistic place and figure out how, instead of completely zeroing them out like they have in some, figure we can do to support these, because you're right, a lot of these groups have some specific actions that are very beneficial at this time. And if we could take a look at the global picture and see what else is there, maybe there could be some way that we can do some things that keeps the organizations moving forward, maybe not at the same level, but at least getting them up cover.
In the proposal we're going to discuss in a few minutes on the H-tax, the River Alliance is in there. Not at the 26,000 level, but it's at the 19.5 level, which is the 25% reduction.
And I wasn't speaking to the not necessarily to the numbers, but just the importance that we support them all in some meaningful way. So asking for some specific.
At this point, yes, we would, whether today or whether additional considerations, but just wanted to bring out that we do not have final allocations to make for these awards yet.
Well, we'll keep that slide handy. Let's keep on going. Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir. So just to continue on this discussion of the hospitality tax budget and accommodations tax, the budget was passed at $7.1 million, which is almost $4.2 million reduction from prior year budgets. The budget does include debt service, but it's not issuing any new debt, so we have not moved forward with new issues as we had discussed for some of the special projects. That left a remaining available for allocation of $2.5 million. As you discussed this piece, we wanted to talk about where we ended FY 19-20, and in the memo that was provided to you, I gave you an outline of how we arrived at the fund balance. Again, just to sort of reiterate, the FY 19-20, the year that just ended for hospitality tax, we had reduced the budget revenues forecasted when we did the budget amendment in March. We anticipated that there would be some reductions, so we scaled back transfers of a little over $900,000 and reduced that from the transfer to the general fund in order to help do that. We still came in a little bit short from where we budgeted for revenues, but also we did not fully expend all of the allocations, so therefore we did end the year with some fund balance. And again, that is an unaudited number. I would be remiss and reminded by our CFO, Jeff Palin, and our finance director, Ms. Alonso, that it is an unaudited number, subject to change, and certainly could be subject to additional adjustments from year-end closing. And if we do reinstate any forfeited allocations, that budget amount that fund balance would also change. So that basically what that gets us to is that we would not need to utilize any prior year surplus to fund this year's budget, but we also wouldn't need to try to cover any shortfalls from last year at this point.
Missy, does that count carry forwards?
So what we did is adjusted. We assumed at this point all allocations to be carried forward. There was permission granted at the when we were doing discussions with the Hospitality Tax Committee and in conversations with you all in the spring that groups could carry forward their request from last year into this year. At that time, it was based on there being assumptions of events that were previously scheduled to be postponed and rescheduled for later. I do not have information for you as to how many of those groups have postponed their events. Of course, we know many groups have just have decided to cancel their events and just wait till next year. So it's kind of a mixture of certain things.
The spreadsheet that the council has been working off of for the last few weeks uses part of that. It uses 383,000 of carry forward from specific groups.
Right.
And you
So-
say,
You accounted for that, Missy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
That's right.
all right. So we're still good, okay.
Your work has not been in vain, Mr. Duvall.
Okay.
All right.
So, Missy, are you ready for the council to take up their deliberations? Or did
We can do that, or I can wrap up with accommodations tax and then go back to these other items, whatever the pleasure of council and you are.
Let's go ahead and finish up the H tax while we're discussing that. If I may, the council was sent at noon today what I hope is the final or close to the final version of the hospitality tax allocations. I have talked with each of you over the last few weeks, and I have pretty good confidence that this is a consensus of the council. I do have a couple of amendments that have come in the last few minutes from members of council that I will add. But if anybody has any questions about what the spreadsheet has, I've been requested to add a $30,000 item for Black Expo and a $10,000 for Leisure Fund. We have the ability under the H tax, we have not reached our limit of $2,583,000 yet. And we have the ability to add those two if it's the wish of council.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Duval. Let's go ahead. I mean, I know right now, so many organizations right now need certainty, and we just need to make sure that we've obviously worked over this. I appreciate your work. I know some of the deliberations that have gone on have lent us to come to some resolutions. I'm not sure if you want to touch on some of the ones that might be of particular importance in the proposals before us for folks who are paying attention. And one of the ways that we're going to be meeting some of our larger obligations that have traditionally been funded by the age tax. You know, we want to make sure that obviously as we go forward, that this year we hope and pray is a different year than we will ever have again. We want to make sure that some of our critical organizations that provide some of the cultural infrastructure for Columbia, that they make it through this difficult time. Everyone is going to have to kind of bear the burden of the economic challenges that we're seeing. So just at the appropriate time, I'd like to support those two amendments. But if we can add a little bit of color to some of the changes from what some folks may have seen in public domain previously.
Okay, it was a difficult task to come up with the funding. The premise that was used was we have core obligations of certain organizations like the Columbia Museum of Art, Historic Columbia, and Ed Venture, where they are partly owned by the city of Columbia. We needed to get them funded. We had other obligations such as the Cleaning Safe and the Yellow Shirts that we had committed a 3-year commitment, and they stated 100%. Other than that, it was generally a 25% reduction from the funding from last year. We also felt like the need was to keep the business organizations that represent the different segments of our community in place. We will use them for conduits of information from the federal government, from the state government, and from the business organizations of the city of Columbia to work with their own districts to maintain the tourism base that we will have on the other side of the pandemic. We have tried to make sure that organizations that have the ability to have events in the next 12-month cycle have some funds available to them. And I'm ready to move on with it, Mayor. If you want to amend the 30,000 and the 10,000 for Black Expo.
Yes, it's a yes, sir. Important to note that this doesn't include the Black Expo and also Leisure Fund, which some of you know is marketing to African American cultural organizations and others looking to support our tourism missions. This does shift funding for the City Center Partnership into another pot that for $150,000, and we'll figure out how that works years going forward. We do have the provision for the ballets included in here as well, right, Howard? That's in the updated document?
The City Center Partnership?
The ballets.
Oh, the ballet. Yeah, the ballets are in there at $50,000 each.
Okay, and also the North Columbia Business Association, $50,000.
And the business and NOMA is in there for $50,000, and the other business organizations. Yeah. I think we are still within the 2.5 that 2.583.
I see a hand up. But did you have something, Mr. McDowell, first?
Yeah, I was still worried about citizen CCP.
City Center Partnership will be funded under the economic development section of the water and sewer. They have been getting $70,000 from that,
Yeah.
that pot. And because of the purchase of the U.S. Post Office in 1401 Main, along with the United Way building on Main, we're increasing that allocation to $150,000. So they will be funded. They'll be funded out of the economic development pot rather than out of H-Tax.
And that amount is 100,000 or what?
150,000.
Was that-
150,000.
Now, Ms. Wilson,
Additionally, from that fund, I just want council to be aware of how we've been using that fund with some of the things that come up along the way that Ryan brings to you. I think we've got a couple in the queue, so I'm just trying to understand how much you're talking about from that fund. Is it an additional 150 or it's to make up, it's 70 plus?
70 up to 150. So you're talking about, what's that? 80,000?
Additional, what, 80?
Additional 80,000.
80?
Right. That's an
So-
additional
so-
80,000.
So Howard, we're looking at economic development doing 100,000.
150.
I'm sorry.
150.
It'd be a total of 150,000 out of economic development.
That's in addition to water and sewer?
No, that is the water and sewer.
That fund, Ms. Reverend McDowell, is usually, we always funded it out of water and sewer, but it's been used for other grants and other economic development initiatives. So I just look that we're just trying to understand and make sure council understands that will reduce that fund for future.
Other stuff, yeah.
It'll take $80,000 more out of the fund.
What unused, what was the math, unused so far we have in the H-Tax cap right now?
Well, if you put the 30 and the 30,000 for Black Expo and the 10,000 for Leisure Fund, it taps us out at 2.5.
About $5,000, right? Just about $5,000. Okay. All right.
Hey, let me ask one other question, Mr. Mayor. Now, the wine and that wine, what was it called? Wine and liquor?
Student Wine Festival.
Yeah, the wine festival. Now, that was canceled. That had a budget of about 45,000.
It's in the budget for 45,000 because that's a carry forward.
All right, that's a carry forward of 45,000. Do we use those funds? Can we use those funds?
It was allocated for the restaurant week. They had 44,550 left that they did not use last year. We added $450 to make the $45,000.
I was
trying not to take things from one organization, carry forward and use it in another organization.
So the funds just sit there and we don't do anything with them?
They go back into the, Missy will have to answer that question. I don't know what they do with it if we don't spend it, but.
That probably is something you should consider if they have canceled an event. But
Yeah,
your
I guess that's my point, Ms. Wilson. We've canceled the event and we got $45,000 just sitting there. What do we do it? Can we use it?
So most of these groups were given, I'm sorry, I see Mr. Davis is anxious to.
I can't hear you.
Why don't you answer first, Missy, and then Mr. Davis, please.
Okay. So normally groups have until May 30th to notify us of carry forward. If they have a remaining balance that they can carry forward. If they don't notify us, then those funds are forfeited. In this case, this year, City Council granted a longer time and they were allowed to carry forward their remaining balance. We probably could sweep back through to find out if any of these organizations are not planning to have an event between now and June of next year. but many of these organizations have postponed their events to later in the year or into, of course, between now and June of next year. So we can do another sweep to see if any of these groups will not have an activity to carry forward. In that case, if they do not have any activities or don't plan to have any activities or expenses or scaled back and don't anticipate all of those available funds, we could return with what those funds, how much there's available in forfeited funds.
If the application was made specifically,
Lost you, was that Teresa?
precedent of
Lost you for a second there, Teresa.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was asking Missy. I'm sorry.
You broke up again, Teresa. I'm sorry.
About no.
Why don't you turn your video off for a second and try it?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and then Mr. Davis has something too. Yes, sir, Mr. McDowell.
Well, it just seems to me, I'm trying, I didn't quite hear Mrs. last statement, but if we've got $45,000 that was not used, and possibly being used in 2021, possibly, could we not use the funds that are there where the event has been canceled?
We can, Ed. We can. I think you asked a direct question. I think you need a direct answer. We can. Mr. Davis.
I'm just agreeing that in some cases there's some there will be some understood and necessary carryovers for some organizations. I kind of appreciate the fact that everybody understands where we are financially, and a lot of this depends on just what's happening outside beyond our control in terms of people's ability to spend money, enjoy themselves, and visit the city. And then I understand that as we move forward, or the public, we should let the public know that we will continue to monitor the revenues under ACE tax and so forth. And also, it may be that we kind of add more to the pot than expected, or less dollars may come in. So this is, am I right, Howard? This is going to be an evolving process.
It's going to be an evolving process.
Yeah, so I think we should always keep that before the public. And also the fact that I think there's been an attempt to be as we can, given what was available to us in terms of distribution, based on recommendations and our understanding of the position of some of these organizations last year and the year before. So I think everybody's looking forward to getting the best that we can get out of what we have to spend, but we'll continue to be vigilant about the dollars and see how everything else continues to impact our ability to make awards.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add the $30,000 for Black Expo and the $10,000 for Leisure Fund and get that on the spreadsheet. And then before we vote on it, Mrs. Devine has asked that we remove the North Main Street Business Association so it could be a separate vote.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do that.
Mr. Mayor.
Let's start, Mr. McDowell.
Yeah, I hate to do it. Look, there are one of the things that happens, of course, when we talk about hospitality tax dollars and what is taking place. We've done a thorough job in maintaining with the funds we have $2.5 million. we've done a good job in maintaining and of course cutting some of those things. Remember, there are small organizations in our city that will dry up because of the lack of funding.
Right.
And the reason why I'm pushing the $45,000, there is a feeding program in the city that has done tremendously well within this city, providing folk with boxes of vegetables and whatsoever. I think Benita Clemens has done an excellent job in making this work throughout the city. I would certainly would like to at least put on the table some dollars for programs like that that's going to continue to feed people within the confines and in the parameter of this city of ours.
No, I couldn't agree more, Ed, that Ms. Clemens has been doing through Diane's call, and our staff has worked with her on some of those food access efforts. I mean, she's done amazing work. We look forward to growing those partnerships. I know H-Tax can't be the source of that. How about we get through this, and then wouldn't hurt if this meeting or the very next meeting, Misty can update on where we are as relates to the
that'd be great.
But I would very much saw her most recent email. Would very much like to support her efforts going forward too. They've been top flight. Mr. Davis, and then I don't see any other hands.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I respect Ed for being flexible. But this type program, there are a number of requests out there. I've got one that came in this morning that honestly speaks to a food desert. And I know that we cannot end up with grocery stores on every corridor, but I would like to see us not using these dollars, but if we go into meeting that void next time, I'd like to see us look at a concerted effort to make sure that we deal with food deserts and these spot areas where there is a need. A lot of senior citizens out there that can use this type program. And I think everybody understands that it's not one of the qualifiers for the H-Tax dollars, but I think we can use tax funding as a model to.
Couldn't agree with you more. And it's important to note, obviously, the incredible work done in partnership with Senior Resources early on in the pandemic. The amazing work that Henry Simons has been reporting on. Doing on 12,000 meals into our young people. Now we realize that food insecurity is real. It was real before the pandemic. It is that much more real now, and we've got to be vigilant in how we approach these things. And the staff has done a really wonderful job in seeking more philanthropic partnerships. We got a few more things in the pipeline too, but no, I couldn't agree more. So maybe if not this meeting, at the very next meeting, Teresa, Missy, let's just get ideas of kind of where we are in the overall process around those other nonprofit organizations that have been applying for funding, get an update.
Mr. May, if we could very well include that in a conversation where all partners are sitting around the table and we devise some plan for strategic funding. Right now, Parks and Rec passed out 12,000 bags. The other organization did on one occasion 600 boxes of vegetables at Drew Park. Another occasion 200. So there's a real need for us to sort of address that. Now it's over with now, but at least we need to put some wood on the fire.
Yes, sir. Ms. Duval, you have a motion?
Sir.
Yes, sir. I move that we vote on the amended chart spreadsheet that was sent out this morning, adding the $30,000 for Black Expo and $10,000 for Leisure Fund.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Just correction, the
Withdrawing
spreadsheet,
the NCBA from this vote, and we'll take it up separately.
Separate vote.
Move the previous question, clerk call roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Motion to appropriate H-Tax and $50,000 for the North Columbia Business Association. Is there a second?
Second.
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 Motion by Mr. Davis, seconded by Mr. Duval. If that's okay.
Question.
Move the previous, Ms. Devine is not voting. Move the previous question, clerk call roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Not voting.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Is this the time for an affirmative vote on the City Center Partnership funding? Or is that on the spreadsheet?
It's not on the spreadsheet, but I would move that we fund City Center Partnership at $150,000 out of economic development as a fee in lieu for properties owned by the city.
Second.
Question.
Ms. McDowell, did you want a second?
$50,000 represent water and sewer. How?
$150,000 for economic development. Yes, sir. All right. Mr. McDowell, you want to second that? You want me to second it?
Yes. I
All
second that.
All right. Move the previous question, clerk call roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye.
Can I ask a question? I know that they have the city center partnership for renewal. I'd like to request that a small committee of council meet with the partnership to talk about suggestions for the renewal. I've had multiple conversations with lots of property owners on Main Street who'd like to restructure the board so it's more reflective of the people who are paying into the fee than it currently is. And so I'd like to request, and we'll do it at the appropriate time, but while we're talking about it, I wanted to put it in your heads.
I'm not sure. Is that so? When we renew, we will take up the structure of the board or what have you.
To do it because it's the only time that you could go in and make changes.
I'm up for any conversation. I will say this, that I'll be remiss if I didn't, y'all. Folks might not put a whole lot of value in free times voting, although I think most of us did pretty well in what the readers think of us. Consistently, the name Main Street and the Main Street Revival is the very best thing in Columbia, and I give a great deal, if not the vast majority, of credit to the investment of this council and the work of the City Center Partnership. So let's make sure that we don't take our eyes off the ball there. It's always a time, particularly after a decade's work, to always reevaluate how you do things. But let's make sure we don't get drunk with our success and mess up a really good thing we got going. CCP does great work. So we'll take that up in due time. Ms. Devine?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to add on that also, just as we talk about help as far as public safety. I mean, the Yellow Shirts have done an amazing job, especially the last few months during the pandemic, helping us address a lot of the needs. And so I would want us also to keep in mind that as we talk about the demands on our police department, the yellow shirts release some of that demand, and they take on some things that our officers should not have to do. And so I think that we also need to be looking at how do we capitalize on that model to make sure we're being able to do that in other areas as well.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. ATAX. Missy?
Yes, sir. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to accommodations tax. So accommodations tax, as we've discussed, the budget is $1.4 million, reduction of 1.2. We ended up, we have not made, of course, city council staff has not made any recommendations or directions with regards to allocations from the FY 2021 budget. As you all know, typically city council allocates to two organizations based on state law designation. Of course, there's a committee that is to approve these allocations or for the ATAX process. Experience Columbia and Lake Murray Tourism are the two groups. Typically, you are funding them at 85% of the available allocation and 15% of the available allocation for Lake Murray.
I move that we accept the recommendation, and as it relates to the general purpose, we fund one Columbia at $52,353, and together we can read $1,000. I would encourage us as well. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
All right. I would also encourage. Let's. We're going to spend some time revisiting this at least quarterly. Obviously, there will be events that will happen, events that won't happen. Just as I would encourage folks to let's be judicious in how we spend the public funds and the public trust. And if in fact there are opportunities to recognize some efficiencies, let's do that, because there will be other opportunities to support your organizations in this entire cultural economic system. We can do this if we right. Is any discussion on the motion? All right. If not, Mr. Duval.
Would you repeat the motion, please?
$52,353 to one Columbia, $20,000 to together we can read, for a total of $72,353 of the general budget.
The allocations to the two organizations are $85.15.
Yeah. I did not affect the recommendation to Experience Columbia or Lake Murray.
Yeah. Okay. I'll second that.
All right. Yeah. All right. We'll move the previous question. Clerk call roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickerman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you.
That's what I was pushing for, man. Here, why you?
All right, y'all, all right, yeah, both of y'all have to mute your phones if you're gonna talk, okay? Y'all are too much. All right, let's rock and roll. What else you have, Missy?
That's all. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Missy. That completes her report, Mayor Benjamin.
That was about that much less painless than I thought, so thank you, Missy, Teresa.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
And honestly, to Howard and everyone else, we that's the importance of having diverse thoughts on the council. We catch things that each other's might miss. I should say in every organization. So, but appreciate the yeoman's work of y'all. Let's keep it moving.
Item 4 for council discussion is the zoning map revision. Ms. Krista Hampton, Planning and Development Services Director, and Ms. Rachel Bailey, Zoning Administrator. And these ladies just have a brief, I don't know that it's a full presentation, but they want to bring your attention the need for us to move forward and how we can move forward with the zoning map revision.
Indeed. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Krista.
This is just a brief overview for us to give you the status and inform you and get feedback from you about a revised process. Rachel Bailey, our zoning administrator, will review the status, and then I will propose a schedule.
Hello, everybody. We met with you all back in January of this year. Feels like it was a lot longer ago, but we met back in January to kind of regroup, talk about where we were with the text and how we were doing with the mapping. Since that time, we have completed the draft map and we have it up on the site. And we also brought a few revisions to the actual text to you all, as the original effective date was going to be May of this year. And then the revisions that came through actually updated the date to November. And as we discuss further our process, you will see that we are now hoping to update that date again to March of 2021. So with the new zoning districts that came from the text, we are making the new map. So we were going to do March public input meetings in person. We were going to do the large meetings as well as some one-on-ones. Those were set to go in the middle of March. Those were shut down and canceled due to the pandemic. So we have sat on the mapping for a while and we are ready to get going again. We're proposing some virtual public meetings and offering some virtual one-on-one appointments, either via phone or video. And we hope to start the map through Planning Commission at the end of the year and bring the map to you all in January. And that date is very important, that once we give public notice that we do go forward with January, as we are going to have to post the entire city, or as close to the entire city as we can, and send notification to every homeowner. So again, if we are set for January, we just need to ensure that that zoning public hearing does occur that month. So now we'll turn it over to Krista to discuss the timeline a little bit more.
So what we are proposing to you now is to have a virtual public meeting that will occur in late September, in addition to about a week of appointments that people can either call in or we can meet with them virtually. As we had described to you previously, the zoning ordinance lends itself to large public meetings, but when you come to a map, people really want to understand what it means for parcels that they own. After that date, we would look, if necessary, to bring that back to you at a work session in Planning Commission in October. Planning Commission would officially hear and recommend the map in November. We would notice the public in December, which would include a mailing, and that would be 30 days out, as well as postings strategically throughout the city. We would have a public hearing on the map in January, and if all goes well, a second reading in February. That would make the date effective for the end of March. That would be March 31st would be our recommendation, and then we would implement that. So the map was already published. It's up at columbiasc.gov if folks want to take a look, and there's also an area for people to comment. But given if council agrees, this is the plan we have for proceeding with what is really an important initiative. So we're available for any questions.
All right. Any questions? All right. I don't see any hands. All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you.
All right, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Krista. At this time, Mayor Benjamin and Council, we ask you to approve the consent agenda items 5 through 19.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
In discussion, move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickerman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval. Thank you. Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Are you on mute, Tamika?
Oh, no, aye. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
And then we'll note on the consent agenda for those who have some time to go review it, a number of very important items on there regarding the health and welfare and safety of our city. So thank you all for moving those along. Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. Moving into a period of ordinances, first reading, item 20, ordinance number 2020-072, amending the 1998 Code of Ordinances of the City of Columbia, South Carolina, Chapter 23, Utilities and Engineering, Article 5, Water and Sewer Rates, Section 23-144, Special Water Service Fees, F, Payment Arrangement Extension.
All right, is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Moving second, discussion. All right, thank you so much for working on this and continuing to work to make this as thoughtful and not just business friendly, but citizen friendly and compassionate as possible. You've done it right. So move the previous question, clerk call the roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine? Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye.
Item 21, ordinance number 2020-073, authorizing the city manager to execute a 14th Amendment to purchase agreement between the City of Columbia and Bright Minds.
Second.
I propose an amendment to it to move this from 60 days to 120 day extension. If there's no protest, Mr. Rickman.
I would just add, I'm fine with that, Mr. Mayor. I just ask that we make this the last extension. We either need to be able to try to close this project or move on.
Let the record and the minutes reflect that. All right.
I second that.
All right. I'm not sure which one you seconded, Sam. Was it mine or Daniel's or both?
I'm agreeing with Daniel.
Yes, sir. All right. So with the amendment, Mr. Duval, Mr. Brennan, I think it was the motion from 60 to 120 days. Objection. All right. Move the previous question. Clerk call the roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye.
Item 22, ordinance number 2020-078, adopting the Commercial Revolving Loan Fund Code revised August 18th, 2020.
Your motion.
Move adoption.
All right. I heard someone else too. Someone else's voice is muffled. I'm not sure if that's Tamika Daniel. I couldn't tell.
Me, I don't know. I think I have so many people on devices. I'm probably not good, but it was me.
All right. Move Mr. Duval, second by Ms. Devine. Any discussion? Really thank the work Melissa, her team, and those that handling CRL are doing. We'll move the previous question. Clerk call roll. Erica?
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 23, ordinance number 2020-079, adopting the Revolving Loan Fund RLF Plan for CARES Act Revolving Loan Fund Supplemental Disaster Recovery and Resiliency Awards.
So move.
A second.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move the previous question. The clerk call the roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. Thank you.
Item 24, ordinance number 2020-080, amending the 1998 Code of Ordinances of the City of Columbia, South Carolina, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 3, Directors, Departments, and Employees, Section 2127, Director of Municipal Court Administrative, Municipal Court Judge, Chapter 13, Municipal Court, Section 13.2, Administrative Municipal Court Judge and Municipal Court Judges, add Section 13.6, Court Administrator, and renumber the sections.
All right. Is there a motion?
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move the previous question. Clerk, call a roll.
Mr. McDowell? I'm
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickaman?
Aye.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Resolutions, item 25, resolution number R 2020-011, approving the renaming of the Change Up program to the Deborah Christie Customer Assistance Program.
Ms.
So
Devine?
So move.
All right. Second by Mr. McDowell. Any discussion? So fitting tribute to years of service. Seeing none, we'll move the previous question. Clerk, call a roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickaman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Vine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis? Mayor Benjamin?
Aye, emphatically.
Mr. Mayor, Clint will be and his team will be pushing out information regarding the marketing of the program, along with the payment plans and other initiatives to help customers during this time. We were going to do it today, but knowing that you all would hopefully approve this change, well-deserved memory of Deborah, we wanted to wait and push it out tomorrow so we could market the name change as well.
Thank you.
Will
Item
they also send us a copy of that? Ms.
Yes, sir. We'll send it to you. Clint, will it go to council this evening before it goes public?
Yes, ma'am. I have the draft with the revised language already available, so I'll send that out shortly.
Thank you. Item 26, resolution number R 2020-086, authorizing the incorporation of the Columbia Community Investment Fund, a South Carolina nonprofit corporation, for the purpose of applying for certification as a community development entity and applying for one or more allocations under the New Markets Tax Credit Program, and authorizing the performance of any and all actions necessary for the formation and organization of the corporation.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Second. Is there any discussion?
Question real quick, Ms. Wilson. Have we had an organization like this in the past?
Yes, sir. We've had a similar organization where honestly it's a formality in order for the funds to pass through the city. But yes, sir, we have done this before.
And those funds are under the federal New Market Tax Credit Program, right?
Yes, it's an application process, a very extensive one we've been going through.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know, of course, how much we would get allocated, but we're certainly making a real push.
Well, good. I think that's a federal program we should really use here in the city of Columbia for economic development purposes in all districts. So I appreciate y'all doing that.
Yes, sir. We'll make sure you all get a copy of the final application.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Appointments.
Did we vote on that one, Mayor?
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Let's vote. I apologize.
I messed you up, Mayor.
It's okay. It's okay, Mr. Brennan.
Mr. Rickaman.
Yes.
Well,
Mr.
wait.
Rickaman. Oh, sorry.
Daniel, did you have?
I was just going to say we need to vote.
Okay. All right. Mr. Rickaman. All right.
All right, Mr. Rickaman.
Aye.
Mr. McDowell.
Yes.
Mr. Duval.
Aye.
Mr. Vine.
Aye.
Mr. Davis. Benjamin.
Aye.
And appointments, Mayor Benjamin. I think Ashley is on the line to assist.
Ashley, hey, how you going? So we're on BPAC first?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what do we have available and which nominees do we have, guys?
So we have 3 appointments that are available. We have representation in all districts, particularly heavy in District 2 and District 3. There are 3 slots available.
All right. Any nominations? BPAC.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Mr. Will Baker from District 3.
All right. Any additional? How many total slots you have available right now, Ashley?
3.
Okay. So we'll do Baker's going to do today. We'll take up appointments between now and future. Let's move. I'll second this nomination. We'll move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Vernon,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. I know that we all get several solicitations. I know I do from folks who are interested in bike ped infrastructure. So let's make sure some of those folks who communicate with us, maybe through social media, other ways that we pull some of them into this applications process and get them active on BPAC. We'll spend some time on that in the next couple of weeks. It might help maybe if we forward those to Ms. Jenkins so she can maybe socialize them into the process. Mr. Rickenman?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, Mr. McDowell.
Yes, DDRC, I'd like to nominate Mr. James Baker.
Can before we go to DDRC Planning Commission, the information I got via email is not up to date. We appointed Mason Hart and he's not on here. We appointed Taylor Wolf and Andrew Salibi to the DDRC. They're not listed on here. So I suggest that we figure out where we've miscommunicated and make sure that we know what the slots that we have.
Are we skipping over the Central Midlands? We got to reappoint Bob Lyman to the Central Midlands.
Well, can we go ahead?
Now, just because Ed had brought it up, I wanted, before we start heading down the path.
Ed was trying to get his nomination in first.
Yeah.
Let's do Central Midlands real quick. And
you're nominating who, Howard, for Central Midland?
Central Midlands.
Bob Lyman.
Bob Lyman.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah.
And there's one slot available, one slot left, right? The reappointment, right?
Appointment.
All right.
So there are quite a few other
Quite a
people
few.
that their terms are ending, but for CMCOG, I did not add the rest of them. I just added Robert Lyman because that's what was discussed. We will have an opportunity to appoint others because a few other people are also, their terms are expiring for CMCOG. But today it was discussed putting this reappointment on.
And that's for re-election, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right.
Found Mr. Lyman, but we got to go ahead and let's make sure we get our arms around the other. How many other slots are opening up or available?
I believe it's 2 others. I have their names listed. I've looked at the terms, and I can just talk with you all about those 2 people offline.
So along with, if y'all don't mind taking a chill pill, let's spend some time between this week and the next resolving exactly who we are in DDRC. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that now, Ashley.
No, that's fine. No, both of those people have been contacted, and that's actually my fault because I have it listed and updated, but it wasn't listed and updated on the chart. But both of those people, Taylor Wolf, that you appointed as a realtor last time, they're aware, they've been contacted. they're talking with the board leads, as well as Andrew. So the only thing that isn't is that I didn't add their name to the latest, but they have been
Mason.
appointed and they've been contacted. So
Mason Hart, is Mason also do your? Is he Boza, Planning Commission? Okay. I said, so Wolf and Salibi are reflected in the number. So we have one vacancy now?
we do. And the last time,
District 2, right?
yes, sir, it can be District 1 or District 2. Mhm.
So we had a motion by Mr. McDowell to appoint Mr. Baker. Is it a second? Is it Mr. Baker or Dr. Baker? I forget.
Mr. Baker.
Okay, all right. I'll second that motion. All right. Any discussion? We'll move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Vernon,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll get an updated list out with Mr. Baker and the other two previous appointees on that list. Okay. And Planning Commission.
All right.
Ashley?
Yes, with Planning Commission, we did appoint one person last time, but they weren't able to fulfill that. So we're looking to fill.
We appointed two people. One was Taylor, Mason Harp, and the other one was Charlie Torini.
Mhm.
And it was he couldn't accept it.
Yes,
Mason
sir.
reflected in here, so we still need to kind of figure out, make sure it's balanced.
I'd like to put Freeman Belzer in for the Planning Commission.
But can we make sure we're
That's
balanced across the districts first?
Okay, let me go
yeah.
ahead and bring that up.
Will, did you nominate someone?
No, sir, I did not.
All right.
Howard did.
So one spot that Charlie declined because of the
Nelson Freeman is District 3, which District 3 already has two. District 1 has two. District 2 has two. One. And District 4, if this comes out right, would be two, I believe. So 1 and 2 are where we're lacking to create balance.
I move to defer until September 15th, whatever that date is.
I thought we had, if one has two, then that's, I don't see a need for any more, Daniel. I don't have it before me, but
Daniel, what's the count on District 2? It's one, right?
Currently has one. District 3 currently has two, and once we make the change, when Ashley updates it, District 4 will have two. So District 1 and 2, we need to get some balance there so they're equally set across the stage. District 3 already has two. That means if you put Freeman in, they'd be three. That's too many from one district.
Yeah.
That sounds downright socialist, Daniel.
I don't know. I just District 3's got, I figure.
Freeman's got his business in District 2.
Let's take a look at it. Ashley, I will give you a call tomorrow.
Unless there's a great reason for pause.
Okay, yes, sir.
Indeed, we can take this up in 2 weeks. I feel perfectly comfortable supporting Freeman Bell, so I think he'd be a great.
I move to defer, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. McDowell. So we can defer. We can obviously take this up between now and the 15th. I would say,
Yeah.
if you have some good and solid, credible appointments that help us with parity across the city, get those in. If they are not in, I would expect us to we got a good qualified applicant. Let's look forward to moving forward with that applicant. Mr. Rickman.
Yeah, just one of the things that caught me when I was reviewing this, and I didn't know why, Isabel Mandela, who's a great person, but I thought we were down to 2 terms, and she's at her 3rd term, and I couldn't remember if she was a holdover because we had such change at one time, or what, but just so that we can explain the reason why she has served more than anybody else, because I did get that question. Somebody asked me the other day, they thought there should be more appointments here, and I didn't have an answer. So if somebody could give us an answer on that, that'd be great.
Okay, I can go back and look. I believe it was a holdover during the time where you were making a lot of changes, but I can absolutely double check on that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Daniel, yeah, her tenure really started in District 1 some years ago.
First appointed Issa.
Yeah.
Okay, that may make. I just couldn't remember. I just wanted to be able to answer. I thought it was because at one time we had this massive exodus and we had to have some kind of leadership, and I thought that was it because I believe she was chairperson at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll get some clarity on that. But back to the planning commission. Let's make sure we plan. We got enough going on. We need to have a fully constituted commission. We got a great appointee in Charlie. We can't have him. I think Freeman would be great, and I'd support his nomination. If you have some other options that provide more balance in the commission, let's hear those as well. But thank y'all. So we'll defer till next meeting on planning commission. Ashley, thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor, I think you all need to vote on Mr. Liming's appointment to the.
Do we not? Thank you for keeping us straight. I thought we did, but if we didn't, we can.
Ms. Hammond's keeping me straight. So.
I believe Erica. So motion by Mr. Duval, reappoint Bob, second by Mr. Rickman, I think. Move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. Devine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Benjamin.
Aye, and thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one other clarification, if you don't mind. If you don't mind going back to item 21, we just want to clarify that language with the going from 60 to 120 days.
All the language to the amendment consistent, unchanged, with the exception of adding an additional 60 days.
Miss, is that your understanding of your question? Is that clarifying what you need? Missy Gentry.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, Teresa.
Is there another clarification you need the council to make for item 21?
Just in that paragraph 1, the 60 days changes to 120, but the end date of this extension is no later than March 1st. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. I think we're done.
Is there any public input online, Erica? On hold?
No, ma'am. No one is called into public input.
All right, Mr. Duval.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session for receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to SC Code 30-4-70A2, COVID-19 business license extensions, discussion of matters related to proposed location or expansion of services to encourage location or expansion of industries or other businesses pursuant to 30-4-70A2, large user rate analysis, create opportunity Columbia, and one more that you added. What was that?
Commission on the future of Columbia.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Second, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. Devine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.